Well, hello, everybody.
Sorry,
Okay,
sorry.
okay,
This is being recorded.
okay, we're good now. So hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for the What's It Like in the Workplace event. Before we begin, just a quick reminder to sign in on the sign-in sheet that's in the chat. And our panel today is being put on by the Society of Women Engineers at UCLA, and it'll be moderated by Annie and Allison, who are both co-directors for the large-scale networking event, Evening with Industry. They will begin the panel with prepared questions, but you as the audience can also ask questions. We're really excited to bring a fresh perspective of what the workplace is actually like and learn from some of the experiences of our incredible panelists. And that being said, let me introduce our speakers today, all of whom work at Humane. So firstly, we have Lilynaz Hashemi, senior software engineer, and she has applied her background in biopsychology and neuroscience to some amazing projects, including ones at Apple to facilitate engaging communication. Her focus has and continues to be promoting positive changes and interactions in people's lives. Next, we are joined by Sara Glick, head of electrical engineering. Sara has extensive experience in working with electrical systems, such as self-driving trucks, and she also co-founded a product design consultancy before joining Humane. And now she continues her passion of creating products that improve people's lives. And finally, we have Bethany Bongiorno, CEO and co-founder, joining us today. Bethany led many key projects at Apple, and her knowledge of software management and leadership were vital in launching the original iPad. She continues to apply these skills to follow her passion in developing successful teams to solve complex problems. So a big thank you to all our panelists for joining us today. We are really excited to hear some amazing career advice. To ask your questions, we ask that you put them in the Q&A feature, and any other comments can go into the chat box. Just keep in mind that we're only going to be asking the questions from the Q&A, so be sure to leave them there if you have any questions. And feel free to submit questions during the event, and the audience questions will be taken at the end. Okay, now I'll turn it over to Allison.
Thanks so much, Diya. We're super excited. Thank you guys again for joining us. And for our panelists, we just want to say, we do want this to be a very much like a conversation. So feel free to add on to each other, just build off each other's ideas. Yeah, we just want it to be a little bit more organic. But to start off, we just want to hear a little bit more about what Humane does. So maybe Bethany, if you want to start out and tell us, what does Humane do? And then if all three of you could answer, what do you do at Humane, and about your journey to getting there. We think a lot of times we think of our career as a straight path, but we really want to hear about some major jumps that maybe you've made. So Bethany, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So I can give a little bit of an overview on Humane, although unfortunately, because we're still in stealth, I can't give you all the good details that I'm sure you all want to know. You'll have to come and work with us to find out those details. So Humane is a technology company. We're located in San Francisco, and we are focused on building hardware, software, and services. And we're currently working on our first product that will hopefully be the first of many. Really interested in pushing mobile computing forward and personal computing, and building, interactions that are incredibly natural and familiar, and also building products that are really universal and approachable. And something that we love to do is build consumer phenomenons that bring a lot of joy to people.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I know for me, I'm please hire me so I can learn more about what you guys do. Bethany, do you want to start by saying kind of how you came to the idea of Humane and your journey through your career?
Sure. I actually have kind of an interesting trajectory to get where I am today. And actually, your comment about your life and your career not being a straight path, but instead being this incredibly windy journey is very true, and something I remind people of all the time. I started in physics and math and in college, and I actually spent most of my time doing astrophysics research, and thought that would be my path in life and go get my PhD. And ultimately decided instead to go and work as a consultant in the data management space. And worked in consulting and software development for a while, and eventually that led me to Apple, where I began in 2008 as a project manager on the iPhone project, which at the time was an incredibly small team. They just shipped iPhone 1.0, and that led to me being asked to lead the iPad 1.0 project. And from there, you know, things kind of grew. I built a big team and eventually was running all the program management for iOS and OS 10 at Apple. And, you know, always looking for what the next thing is and how to kind of level up and gain more skills and get more experience. And I knew in my whole career, I knew that I wanted to be in the C-suite eventually. I knew, like, I want to have a seat at the table, and that's, you know, those are the types of conversations I want to be in. And so that was always in my line of sight as what I wanted to do eventually. And so I left in 2016 along with my husband, and we took a break, and then, you know, took some time off and tried to figure out what was next. And then we decided to build our own company and started Humane.
Yeah, that's super awesome. Lily, do you want to share a little bit about your journey?
Sure. Like, you guys put it really well, that, you know, your career path isn't a straight line trajectory. When I was in college, I double majored. I double majored in computer science and biopsychology, cognition, and neuroscience. I initially thought I wanted to get my PhD in clinical psychology and do therapy and work with autistic kids, and it's all I'd been doing from like high school to through college. That was my line of sight. And then I kind of just stumbled upon programming along the way, and somehow ended up switching gears completely, thinking I would eventually go back. And that kind of led to how I ended up at Humane. So when I did that, one summer I decided to take a break from the research, and I was like, let me just try something technical. So I interned at Apple that summer, and then I had so much fun there. I was like, let me just go back and expand my technical expertise, and then maybe one day I'll go back to research. And that hasn't quite happened yet, but when I was at Apple for about 5 years. I worked on the messages team for 4.5 years and Siri for 6 months. In those last 6 months, I started really itching to want to get back into that mental health space. And I ended up chatting with Bethany and Emron, and they kind of convinced me that I could do that at Humane. And so I made the jump, and it's been really great. So that's kind of been my story.
That's super awesome. I love that you get to combine these two passions that you've had and really make something unique out of it. Awesome. And Sarah, do you want to share about your journey as well?
Yeah, sure. I was also an intern at Apple a long time ago on the iPod hardware team, back when iPods were a thing Apple sold, which was my first insight into what it's like to work as an actual engineer. And I really loved it. I loved the team. I loved the working environment. So after that internship, I joined Intel for 2 years, which was a very different place to work. And I learned a lot about what I don't like at a job by working at Intel. And then I worked at Fitbit for 4 years on different wearable devices, which was a blast. But after 4 years, there's only so much innovation happening on wearables. I got kind of bored. And so I wanted to do something pretty different. And so I worked on self-driving trucks, which was very different. And that was very interesting. And after that, I started working as a consultant with several early stage startups in the Bay Area, and Humane was one of my clients. And so that's how I got started on the Humane project.
And then we convinced her that she just had to come here all the time and she could never leave. That was basically what happened.
Yep.
We wanted her all to ourselves and no one else could have her.
That's so awesome. I was just curious, Sarah, it sounds like you just, a lot of times during your career, just like, oh, I don't really want to do this anymore. I'm going to do something different. I was curious, like, how did you get the courage just to start something new and just like kind of pick up everything that you had known and just go completely different?
Yeah. I think it comes with experience. You just learn that, you know, you gain confidence in yourself and your abilities to learn new things, learn new skills. And so that was a part of it. And also I think just growing your network and knowing that, you know, you always have people that you know scattered around different companies in the industry, or, you know, as a consultant, knowing that I had former coworkers at different companies and that they would probably need help at some point and would hopefully come to me for help.
Yeah, that's super cool. And it's amazing how you've experienced so much in your, you know, career with all of these different companies. I guess following up with that question, how do you know when it is like the right time to move? Like what tells you in your current position where you're like, you know what, maybe this is a time that I should move on to the next thing? Do you have like anything in specific that you can share?
Yeah. I think for myself, there are 2 times where I know I'm ready to make a change. One, I would say, is more like my Fitbit example. You know, I was working with a great team. I really enjoyed my role. There was nothing that I was unhappy about, other than I just felt like I wanted to be stretched and challenged more. And I didn't think I would get it at that company, just because that wasn't the direction that the roadmap was going in. So that was a time where I felt like I had challenged myself as much as I could in that company. And if I wanted more challenges, I was going to have to leave. And then I think the other time where I have left companies has been because I'm just unhappy with the way things are going. Either, you know, I think for Intel's a very large corporation. Things don't move very fast. And so for me, I got a little bit bored with the pace of work. There have been other times where I felt like I needed to leave because I didn't necessarily agree with the direction that the manager had set for the group or the team. So I think it depends.
Yeah,
that's
I used to say that there was like a formula, and the formula has a bunch of variables and it has to all balance out. And, you know, sometimes one thing makes up for, you know, inadequacy in another area. You're really unhappy maybe with the leadership style, but you feel like you're learning a lot and you're like, man, I'm gaining a lot of tools from my toolbox. This is a really great opportunity to learn a ton. I might not be super happy with this thing, but this is making up for that. And then there's some times where you just can't get the formula to work, and you just realize like there's nothing I can do to make it feel good. And that's when it's time to leave.
And just to add to that, something I kind of did when I was just changing teams within Apple and then leaving Apple was I had a really hard time leaving my first job because, I mean, it's kind of where I got the most experience. Like, it was my first thing out of college. It felt like a home to me. And even though a lot of the key people that made it feel home had already left, I still had a really hard time letting go. And so what I started doing towards the end of that was I created a system for myself where every day I like wrote down whether it was a thumbs up day or a thumbs down day. And like, if you look at that over a month, without it objectively tells you how you're feeling about work. Without you actually having to think about because when you think about everything abstractly, like at the end of a month, you're like, oh, like I feel pretty good about this. But when you think about how each day went, it was more negative than it was positive. And it gives you an indication that maybe you should make a change.
Yeah, that's a really great tip. I was also curious, do you guys have any insight on like how long do you kind of just like push and be like, oh, if I stay, I can make it better, or I can help improve things, versus just it's time to let go?
I would say that establishing the why are you there is a really important thing right up front. Like when I went to Apple, the reason I decided to go there was because I had gotten rejected from business school and I was really feeling down about it, and I didn't really know what to do with my career, and I felt like I was at kind of a wall. And I decided that I was going to go to Apple, and my goal of going there was going to be to learn as much as possible. And I just kept telling myself, like, I remember writing it down, like, this is my PhD, period. I was like convincing myself that I was just going to go and try to learn as much as I could. And that was really the goal. And every year I would say, is that still the goal? Yes, the goal is still that I still want to learn. Am I still learning? Yes, I'm still learning. And then eventually the goal changed, right? And I wanted, more influence. I wanted a seat at the table. I wanted more leadership. The goals became different. And when I felt like I wasn't accomplishing the goals anymore, or that it wasn't possible to, again, that formula, sometimes things can help balance it out, but when it wasn't, equating to what I needed it to, was the time that it was time to go. But I think really understanding, like, why am I here to begin with? Like, what am I trying to get out of this? And really thinking about that is important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think really focusing on that why you're there and keeping that at the center of it. That's awesome. I guess our next question, we wanted to ask Bethany specifically, but of course, Sarah and Lily, please feel free to jump in. I guess as like college students, we're always asked, what do you want to do after college? What do you want to do after college? And I think a lot of times, at least for me, I'm like, I really don't know exactly what I want to do. So we were curious, like, what are your guys' advice to how to make the next concrete step in our career paths or whatever without knowing exactly what we want to do for the rest of our lives?
I'm super curious what Sarah and Lily have to say about this. But I definitely had no idea what I was doing when I left college. I knew that I didn't want to go get my PhD. That's basically all I knew. All of my, friends in college in my physics program were all going to get their PhD. I was the only student that was going to go make money. That was the only thing I wanted to do, was go make money. And so I went into being a consultant at PricewaterhouseCoopers. And I think that specifically as women, a lot of times we think that we have to have it all planned out, and that we have to see the path all in front of us, and it has to make a ton of sense. And we think that, like, our decision of what we study in college is incredibly important. We think what our first job is, that's incredibly important. And if I make the wrong choice, it's going to, like, doom me for the rest of my career. And I get that question a lot from women. They say, what should I study in college to, like, set myself up to be successful? What should my first job be to, like, set my career up correctly? And I always tell them, like, none of it really matters. You should really focus on what brings you the most joy. What are you passionate about? And if you go and study the thing that brings you the most joy, if you choose your job, your first job specifically, on what you feel like is going to bring you the most joy every day, the thing that you are most passionate or excited about in terms of working on it, that is going to help you figure out who you are. And it's going to help you figure out what you like, what you don't like, what you want to spend time on, what you don't want to spend time on. Especially given that, like, your first thing out of college is really still like a self-exploration. Like, it's still you trying to figure yourself out. And I think really following your joy as much as possible, whether it's from one job to the next, will really help you build the right path. And things are so much easier when you enjoy what you're doing. Like, it's just, you're better at it, like, you're more successful. And so if you can just focus on, like, always trying to do the thing that you enjoy the most, your path will be pretty clean. So that's what I would say.
I actually really like that question, because I went into college thinking I had, like, a 10-year roadmap planned out for myself. And when I started just even taking programming classes, I just remember my parents being like, you're just going to lower your GPA, like, you're distracting yourself, stop. And so what I actually took away from that whole experience was, you can't really have a plan, and you should just kind of go with what feels right in the moment. And I know that sounds like a very loosey-goosey, unstructured way to think about things, but your first job out of college, it actually doesn't matter where you end up, because you'll either learn what you don't like, you'll make connections for the next step, like, you'll know what you don't want in a job. I think I got that advice when I was in college from my friend's dad, and it was just great advice. It was, don't focus too much on exactly, like, what that offer looks like, where you might be, all these things. Like, your first few years out of college is really a learning opportunity, and go somewhere where you think you'll learn the most. Whether it's, like, maybe it's not in the industry that you're interested in, but there are other skills you could learn. Like, it's still a great opportunity to just, like, find what you like and you don't like, and you might surprise yourself. Like, you might end up somewhere where you were like, oh, I had no idea I was even interested in this thing. So my advice would be just, like, try as much as you can, and, like, don't worry too much about that decision of, oh, if I make the wrong choice, I'm going to totally screw everything up, because you won't. And that's something that I think as women, we also like carry, like we have to go that extra mile and think a little further. But if you just kind of like let that pressure go, things end up working out pretty well.
Yeah, I definitely subscribe to the go with the flow career plan. I just think it's hard to predict what you're going to want in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. Like your life is going to change in unpredictable ways, and what you want is going to change too. And so I think probably none of us know what we want to do for the rest of our lives, even now, but we know what we want to do right now, and that's what we're doing.
It's so true. I tell people all the time that I feel like I've lived 5 lives. I'm like, and that is part of having like this growth mindset. Like it's part of, believing that you can have 5 lives and do 3 different, career trajectories. And I think that leads you to ultimately finding like what you're really happy doing. If you allow yourself to explore and kind of try things and not lock everything in so early on.
Yeah, that's absolutely great to hear. Lily, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just one more note is always question to make sure you're still learning. It kind of relates to your previous question. Like every year at Apple around my 1-year anniversary, I would stop and I'm like, am I still learning? Like when that answer starts feeling no, that's when you should start reevaluating like what could be the next thing. And then before you know it, you'll find something, whether you like it more or less, you'll learn more. You'll learn something new.
Yeah, definitely. And I really appreciate these like responses. I think especially as a junior talking to upperclassmen who are trying to decide their last internships, it feels like we're running out of time to explore, but it's so great to hear that, you're just continuously exploring for the rest of your career. Yeah, so with our next question, we wanted to move on to kind of what you wish you knew about the workplace while you're in college. So I guess we'll just start off with that question. If Lily, you want to begin of what is something you wish that your former college self knew?
I've been thinking about this question for a few days since you sent out that list, and I'm still grappling with what would have been helpful at the time. Part of when I switched into engineering was, I knew it was a male-dominated field, and like I knew that even going into those classes, but I was still just shocked, like at how much so, like knowing what the numbers were on paper, like sitting in the classes and then also ending up in the workplace, just like how very little female presence existed. And so I don't know if like having known that earlier would have changed how I would have reacted. I know earlier on in my career, I just assumed that was normal and I was like, this is all good. And also in college, it was more like I'm not going to make this a thing. Like I'm basically like everyone else. But the truth is like, I wasn't, and that's okay. And to embrace that and to all, changes once you enter the world. I just remember my first year at Apple, I was just like, it's fine. Like, it's okay that I'm the only woman here. And that shouldn't have been my attitude. So that would have been something I would have liked to talk my college self now. How much that would have also know that without experiencing it.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Lily. I guess this next question is a little bit more for Bethany. We are curious, like a lot of us here are engineering students. We take a lot of technical classes and work in a lot of technical environments. And we were curious, when you go into the workplace where it's a lot more cross-functional and people-focused, like when you did that, what was something that surprised you? And what is one of like the first lessons that you learned as a manager about leading and working with others?
It's a lot of work. I think the thing, and it actually leads into what Lily was talking about too, and her question. I think the thing that I wish I learned in college that would have been really helpful going into the workforce is just how to collaborate with different types of people, handling difficult situations. What are some tips and tricks on de-escalating situations or navigating difficult conversations, and difficult personality types. And I think that one of the lessons that I learned of being a manager, when I first became a manager, my boss at the time told me, not everybody's cut out to be a manager. And I was really young, and I was, 24, 25. And I said, like, well, whatever. Like, I know how to do this. And, she was like, listen, not everyone's cut out. I just want you to know that it's really hard, and it's emotionally difficult, and there's a bit of psychology involved, and you have to be emotionally available, and you have to be able to read people, and not the same level of, not the same type of management style works for everybody. You have to adapt yourself per person. So every single person on your team requires a different type of management, and you have to be really mindful, and you have to be really compassionate, and in terms of like taking the time to understand each person individually. And when I started at Apple, I was very like execution focused. I was just like, bottom line, get the work done. That this is all we're here for. And management requires like more softness to it. Like, you really have to be really thoughtful about how you inspire and lead and take care of your team. And so I think, and help them navigate difficult situations and difficult conversations and all of those things. So I think those people skills is something that, I kind of wish I had spent more time on in college, or there was more education around it. I got a lot of it like on the job by screwing up a bunch of times, and telling myself like, I'm never going to do that again. And then reading a bunch of books. Like I did a ton of reading, in my career to try to better understand people. And yeah, so I think that, and that's honestly the knowledge I pass on to everybody I meet when they say they want to be a manager. I always tell them like, it's just be ready. It's like an emotional shift. It's a different type of work, and you just have to be, you have to understand that and respect that it's a different type of work, and know that it is work on top of the work that we're doing, which is like also really difficult. And so, yeah, I think like I would have loved that some of those soft skills would have been taught, but that's definitely the one thing that I've learned about leadership and management, in my career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really amazing. I love your point about understanding that everyone likes to be managed or led differently. And I was curious, do you have any tips on how to just gauge how people like to be led? Because I think sometimes we don't even know how to verbalize how we like to be led. So as a manager, how do you kind of figure that out?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is about getting to know people individually, and really spending the time, talking to them and understanding them. And really it's about like feeling them out in a conversation. So like even in my time at Apple, when I had a really, really large team, some of the people on my team, I could tell from getting to know them that they wanted to connect on a really personal level. They wanted to tell me about their kids. They wanted me to know what was going on within their relationships. They wanted me to give them advice on things that they should be doing outside of work. They wanted to have deeper conversations, more emotionally supportive conversations. And then other people like put up boundaries, and like they didn't need that or want that, and they don't need it. What they need is more tactical. And I think it just takes time, and it takes a ton of respect, because I think some people want to just enforce their management style, and they just want to say like, I have one management style and you're all gonna do it this way. You're all gonna communicate with me this way. So as an example, like you're all gonna type up summary status updates and you're gonna email them to me by this date. And this is, you all have to comply with what works for me. And the truth is, it's actually the bottom up. Like it really has to be like, how do I get the best out of this one person? This person on my team is incredibly great at like making really detailed spreadsheets and like capturing all the data, or this person is amazing at giving presentations and like talking me through problems, right? I mean, those two styles are very different. And just because they can't comply to what works for me doesn't mean that they're not doing a good job. It just means that like, it's not in the way that's like best suited for them, So I think it really is about trying to like flip it on its head a little bit and say like, it's not about like top down, it actually should be more about the bottom up. And I think when you do it that way, it's when you take somebody and really help them become the best, you know, version of them and doing the best work that they can, and ultimately helping them grow their career. And the more you can do that, the more they're going to rise up and you're going to rise up with them. And I think that's just how I've kind of thought about it, is really just, you know, taking the time, respecting their own process and looking at it upside down. It's like, you know, not from top down, it's like bottom up.
Great. Yeah, thank you so
Absolutely.
much for that. I feel like we don't often hear about what management is like, especially when we're in college, focusing only on our technical skills. Wanted to shift gears a little bit. I know I've talked about this with Bethany for a little bit, about mentorship and the importance of that. So I was wondering if you and maybe Sarah can talk about mentorship in your life, and how you find mentors, especially when you're in college, and how do you reach out to them, and maybe talk about some impactful mentors that you've had in the past. If Bethany, you want, or whoever wants
Sorry,
to
I
start.
thought Sarah.
Sure, we can start with Sarah.
Sarah, yes. Let's have Sarah.
Yeah, you know, I don't think I've had official mentors in my career, to be honest. But I think I mean, of course, I've had lots of senior engineers and managers that I've looked up to, and I think have gotten probably a similar relationship from. You know, my first couple of jobs, you know, I was always the junior engineer on the team. And so there are a lot of more senior engineers on the team that I could look up to and bounce ideas off of, and, you know, work closely with to learn from them how to do the technical work. I think that's shifted in the last couple of years, as I've become more of that senior role or become the only electrical engineer on a project. So I think less mentorship has been helpful to me, but I think it still comes back to networking. I think that is something that I didn't really understand the importance of in college or in my first couple of jobs, to be honest. But only later in my career have I really understood the importance of networking and like just cultivating your network, because these are the people that you're probably going to keep seeing over and over again in your career. And it is so helpful to always know, like, okay, I don't know that much about this one topic, but I know this other person who does, and I can just shoot them a text message and ask them like, hey, what do you think of this thing? Or, you know, pull them in to consult or have a phone call with them. So I think of it less as mentors and more just like utilizing the network of people that I know, and work with.
That's really great. Sarah, I was wondering, could you expand a little bit about what like networking looks like to you? I think a lot of times in college, we like hear, oh, there's a networking event, and we're like intimidated. Like, what does that mean? We just collect as many business cards as possible. But to you, what does that look like to build your network?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's not that in my mind. For me, it's really building relationships with people. So, you know, building relationships with coworkers. You know, in consumer electronics, we do a lot of work with external partners. And so cultivating those relationships, you know, we work with external partners that support all the startups in the Bay Area. And so no matter, you know, what startup you go at, it's the same people. And so if they don't like working with you, they can make your life really difficult. So it's just really important everywhere you go to make sure that you're cultivating positive relationships, because they pay dividends years later.
That's true. I love what you had to say about the mentor thing, because I actually like, sometimes I hate that word because it's so heavy and weighted and feels intimidating. And like, I tell people a lot that, you know, mentors can take a lot of different forms, and we have such this idea of what your mentor looks like, that it's this really important relationship, and there's like they should be helping us with everything. And in reality, you know, mentors can be really good at like one little itty bitty thing and terrible at a bunch of other stuff. But like, that's the person that you go to when you need that thing. And I've always looked at it like, you have a person, you don't even have to use the word mentor, but you have the person who's like your ideator, who you go to when you like want to brainstorm ideas, when you like want to bounce something off of them and get their thoughts. You have the mentor or the person that is your connector. Like, hey, I really like don't know how to solve this problem, but I know this person who knows everybody, and I'm going to call them and say like, hey, what's our connection in this space? You're the you know, there's the person that like helps you emotionally when you need someone to like pick you up and tell you like, you got this, like you have this, everything's fine. Like the person who's cheering you on, your cheerleader. And I think there's so many different versions, and it doesn't all have to be found in one person. And so that's why when like someone says, who's your mentor? It's like, well, I don't know. It's been like a bunch of people, but they've all played this like very specific role. And I don't put too much weight on all of them, and they don't have to be mentors for my entire life. They can be a mentor for 5 minutes or 20 minutes or, you know, a month or for a period of my life. And I've had a couple mentors in my life that literally were only there for 5 minutes. Like they were someone I met, you know, at a conference, or I had a phone call with them, and they gave me like just what I needed in that moment to like get the job or finish something that I couldn't figure out, or just like power through something that was really difficult, because they told me like, you got this, it's okay, like you can do this. So I think, you know, we put a lot of weight on that word mentor, and I think we just need to change how we look at it. You know, like Sarah said, it's something a little bit different.
Yeah, definitely. And Bethany, I know you have this amazing story of a mentor, go-to person that you call, that you called when you were trying to transition. Would you mind sharing that story?
Yeah, when I was thinking about leaving Apple, I was having a really hard time deciding if I was going to leave. And you know, my parents were telling me you should leave. My husband, who was working there, was like, let's go, it's time to leave. Everyone was telling me that I should do it, but for some reason I just didn't. I didn't have the guts to do it yet. I hadn't figured out, you know, whether it was the right thing. And I was, you know, a director there. I was on a career path to be, you know, a even more senior role there. I had a huge team. Everything was lining up, but if something wasn't balancing, my equation wasn't balancing. And so I went onto LinkedIn and went onto Google, and I Google searched like women in tech. And this woman's name came up. Her name's Allison Chen, and she runs a company called Women Who Tech. And of course, that's what Google came up with. And I just clicked on it. She was like the first person I clicked on. And she runs a company with her husband. She is very vocal about women in technology. And I sent her a LinkedIn message, and I just said, hey, you have no idea who I am, but I'm writing to you. And it was like 11:30 at night. It was like one of those like, dear God, help me. It was 11:30, and I said like, I'm really stuck. You don't know who I am, but this is a little bit of background on me, and I'm about to make a really big decision in my career, and I don't know what to do. And I was wondering if you might be able to help me, like, you know, give me some guidance or mentor me through this thing. And she just wrote back like instantly, and she said, here's my phone number, call me. And I called her, and she just talked to me for about an hour. She heard my story, and she just said, you know, listen, everything you're telling me, it just tells me that you need to jump. Like, you have to make the jump. And my job right now on this phone call, my only job is to tell you that there's a net there. Like, you can jump, there's a net, go ahead and jump, and it's fine. Your career and what you've done and your history and all of your accomplishments, like, that is your net. It is still there. No one can take it from you. You can always go back at any point and go get that job again, or get a similar job or something even better. Like, you can jump, the net's there. And that's my job today on this call, is to tell you that. And I hung up the phone and came upstairs and told my husband we were going to quit. And he's like, I've been telling you that forever. Why is it some random person on the internet that has to tell you this? And I just said, well, sometimes like you need that, you know, you need like an objective third party who's like, just gives you that. So I think, and this woman, I don't talk to her at all. Like, she was someone I met for 5 minutes, and but was the reason that I ultimately had the guts to do what I needed to do. She was that like mentor for 5 minutes that said like, you got this, go ahead. And that's so important for women. I think that we like do that for each other, because it really made, I mean, that made a huge difference in my career and my life, you know, and so the more we can do that for each other, the better.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think, like you're saying, a lot of times we imagine our mentors as like people that we cross paths with and then our lives are forever intertwined. But it's really great to hear that it's like, it may just be a slight brush, but it's really changed your entire career and life from that. That's awesome. Lily, did you want to share any of your experiences as well?
Sure. I think Sarah and Bethany really put it together very well. Like the whole, both network and mentors, like it's very a heavy term. It's really just the relationships you're making, and you guys can just, you all can just start in college with your friends, because you're all in these technical fields right now and you're all going to go and do different things. And then before you know it, now you have a network across all these different companies across the country, across the world. You know, you're all doing different things. That's a great network right there. And it might not even look like one because everyone's a friend. But sorry. So my stories are pretty similar to Sarah and Bethany, where I had people who I worked with in my first few jobs where I just wanted to aspire to be like them technically. And then we became just very close socially. And now we're still really good friends and we keep in touch. And I've had a few of those relationships. And those are the relationships where I learned the most, was just kind of seeing the people around me that I wanted to either work with, or there were certain skills that I've seen amongst different coworkers that I wanted to acquire for myself, and just trying to work alongside them as well for those things. I think that went a really long way. But while you're in college, the biggest thing you can do is just continue to stay in touch after you graduate, and just check in on each other over the years. Like I still do that with my friends from CS in college. They're all in New York. None of them really ended up out here. And every now and then I'm always still trying to poach a few of them to come work with me. So you never know.
You never know. I love that. Yeah, I was just going to add one more thing about the mentor thing that I think is really important, is that for women especially, finding a mentor that is a man is very helpful. And I think there are a ton of men, I know there are a ton of men who are strong advocates for women in tech, especially. And in my career, I have had, and it's not even a mentor, it's more advocate, that is really important, because when we know that there's more men in the room, always, we also know that unfortunately in most places men's voices are louder and taken more seriously than women's. It's unfortunate, but it's the truth right now, and we're trying to change it. And like the work we're doing today as a group is like trying to continue to like make this not the case, but it is the case. And something that I did from my first job out of college was I found a partner at PwC, this guy named James Ruan and Dave Wysocki. There were two partners at PwC, and I asked them, like, would you be my advocate? Would you be my mentor? Would you be my advocate? Would you do the work for me? And really what that came down to was like, when you see an opportunity that is really great, would you help me get it? When you see, you know, an opportunity that I should, you know, have, can you speak up on my behalf and say like, you should give it to Bethany? And I really built those relationships. And again, it came down to relationship building. I spent a ton of time with them. I really learned from them as much as possible. And I asked them, like, would you be my advocate? And still to this day, and I did the same thing at Apple, and it really, really helped. And still to this day, actually last week, my partner from PwC, which was my first job out of college, one of my advocates there, the guy Dave Wysocki, he called me up and he said, hey, I'm doing like a women's event. I run the women's advisory group at PwC, and I would love for you to come back and talk to the women at PwC about your career and like mentorship and advocacy, and like how do you, you know, move up in your career, and what are the ways that you can get your voice to be heard, and all of those things. And, you know, him and I have had a relationship like that, you know, since I started there, which was going on 15 something years ago. And so I think it's just there are a ton of men in tech that really care about this and are really fighting on our behalf, and they will stand up and talk for you and advocate for you and help you get the opportunities you deserve. So I think it's just something that's really helpful.
Yeah, that's super insightful. And I think sometimes we forget to that we have allies outside of just like women in tech that want to help us and are there for us to support us. And that's really great. I think our last section for the panel today that we wanted to talk about, kind of related to what we were just talking about actually, is just about diversity and inclusion. You know, as like Society of Women Engineers at UCLA, that's something that obviously we care a lot about. And it has been something that we've been hearing about more, but we want to really learn about like, how can we actively be making change in our communities? So I guess our first question is just, as a woman in STEM, it's sometimes easy to just feel like we have to prove ourselves among our male peers. And we were just curious if you guys have advice to deal with this kind of pressure. Lily, maybe do you want to start us off?
Sure. Yeah, I could tell you I had and still do a little bit. It doesn't necessarily always go away. Imposter syndrome, where you're constantly doubting yourself, thinking, oh, like, should I have said that? Do I actually know what I'm talking about? And it is really hard to overcome. It's a real fear and a real challenge. Earlier on in my career, I wish I just was okay telling myself that it's okay to sound like the dumbest person in the room, because when you speak, you actually aren't. It took me like a while, until like probably my senior year of college, after I'd worked at Apple and then come back and felt sort of validated just through that, to be like, okay, I'm not the dumbest person in this room. Let me listen to what everyone else is saying, to realize that that was just true the entire time. That when you actually take the time to listen, that it is like your fears are inside of you. And so it's just a constant, like, just remember that it's okay to ask those questions, because a lot of the time other people are thinking the same thing and they're just not speaking up. And then you can clarify for everyone else, or you just like take the discussion in a different way that it might not have gone, and you might have a different perspective. So definitely like challenge your imposter syndrome whenever you start feeling it. I know that's a very tough one, and it's easier said than done. That was a big one. And then the other thing is, you know, it's really important to care about diversity in the workplace and inclusion. I know at the beginning of mine, I just wanted to fit in and I didn't want to stand out as the only woman on the team. And that's something to this day that I still regret. It actually took my boss at the time, who was also my advocate, mentor, and all of that, and pushed me a lot at Apple, to be like, no, Lily, like, we need to do something here. And, you know, and he kind of pushed me to realize, like, by changing the people we're hiring so that it's more of a representation of the population, the product itself just does a lot better. And I think it's super important to keep pushing that as well. So just try to keep doing what you guys are already doing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I love your point about not being ashamed of being different, and just like, you know, owning it. We are where we are for a reason, and like, you know, we bring different perspectives, and that's something that we should really value instead of try to hide. I think also just in general, like when we're newer, it's easier to be like, oh, I feel like I shouldn't share, like I don't really know as much as I'm talking about. But I think actually sometimes just having that different perspective of someone who's fresher and like doesn't know the space as well, to like add a twist to it, can help as well. Anyway, sorry, I'm not a panelist here. I should stop talking.
Like, I actually have a very funny story about that. So I was an intern at Apple. And so when I interned, I was the only woman in the entire ComApps org. And that org was responsible for like the back ends for FaceTime, and the front ends of FaceTime, iMessage, and your communication technology. And at the time, iChat and all of that. And when you think about that, you're like, what does your demographic user base look like? I don't think it's only men, right? And so I thought that was like just shocking. And so they gave me like a development phone running the latest iOS that was about to be released. And they were coming out with all those features that year. It was iOS 8. And I remember I found this really interesting bug, because this was only a use case that I chose to do. Was me and my roommate at the time, because we both were internal, Apple housing, whatever. We were both laying in bed, sending selfies to each other, laying upside down, like just back and forth. And it was really stupid and nonsensical. And from that, I found this bug where like, if you try to take a photo not in a certain rotation, like the entire thing wouldn't work and wouldn't look good. And this was like 3 weeks before release. And I sent it to my manager and he was like, oh my God, this is a horrible bug. We need to fix this. So it's just like, oh, like if I was ashamed to be like, oh, and he was like, how did you find this? And I'm like, I was taking selfies upside down. Like, you know, just, I also helped prevent a problem there. So I still find like, it's good to just not be ashamed of that.
That is an amazing story. I absolutely love that. Yeah, selfies are great. Another question we had with diversity and inclusion is, you know, right now it's like a lot of people are talking about diversity and inclusion, especially with everything that's going on in Black Lives Matter. And then women in STEM has always, or has more recently been a topic of discussion. And it seems like a lot of corporations want to just like hire more people of color. And while that is important, we also recognize that it's important to just have that atmosphere within your team, within a company, to promote, you know, just making everyone feel comfortable in that space. And, you know, us as college students, when we're going into the workforce, we might not be, you know, at the top yet, and we can't implement things like top down. So how would you suggest, as just people working on a team, to add this component of diversity and inclusion and making people feel like they have a safe space to say what they wish and not feel discriminated against? Bethany, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, I'd love to hear Sarah's thoughts too. I think that the biggest thing that I think about a lot is that it really isn't top down. In fact, that's like, it has to be from the bottom up, because we're not in most of the conversations or meetings. So it's not really so much on our shoulders to help create that environment. It's important for us to set the tone and set the requirement that this is the environment we want to have, and this is our obligation as a company, and this is the vision, right? But in terms of the execution and the work that needs to be done day to day in every meeting, every single teammate has to take on that responsibility, and every single teammate has to be an advocate for creating that environment that feels safe, creating that environment that is inclusive. And it is work. Like, you actually have to be mindful and you can't ignore it. And so it shows up in a couple of ways. I think one, and this is something we recently did at Humane, but I think one is education. I think especially when for so long, like, we typically have surrounded ourselves with people that are like us. We are not the experts in how to create an environment that's inclusive for everybody. And like, thinking that, you know, me personally knows best how to do that is just ignorant, because and so really bringing in people who can help teach us about what matters, what is important, how do you use the language in the right way, what is inclusive language, what's not, where are we failing, where are we doing a terrible job, where are we doing a great job. And it takes a lot of self-reflection, and it also requires you to be vulnerable and to realize that you make mistakes and you're not going to get it right, and in fact you probably haven't been getting it right, and there is a sense of vulnerability that you have to be comfortable with. And I think that's like step one, that you have to be comfortable learning, knowing you have to grow, and being a little vulnerable to create a safe place where you can do the work needed to create the right environment. So that's I think education is huge, and then I think doing the work is important. And then the third thing is like calling yourself out and others when you get it wrong, and having it be a safe place where it's okay if you get it wrong, as long as you recognize it and say like, okay, I did a terrible job there, or I really didn't do the right thing here, or this didn't feel good, let's fix it. And I think that's also really important. I don't know, Sarah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think having the environment where you feel safe to tell people like, hey, you know, you said this thing the other day and I don't think you meant it to feel this way, but it didn't feel good to me. And knowing that people can hear you and have like a very respectful dialogue, I think is the key to making it all happen. And that takes work. You know, you have to, have good relationships. You have to have a company culture where those conversations are commonplace, in a sense that people are used to being able to take someone aside to talk to them, I think is really important.
Yeah, and where people believe that it matters, because you see now in the industry some tech companies saying that this stuff doesn't matter, like it's all about the bottom line, it's about our mission is making money, our mission is this product, anything else is just a distraction, right? And so that I have personally worked for people who, when you would come forward and say, hey, this is really problematic, this person is problematic, this, it's not, I don't feel comfortable, they would say, but they're really good at their job. That was the response. Yeah, they're problematic and they don't treat people well, but they're really good at their job, so that's fine. Because to them, that was the most important thing, and anything else was a distraction. And I think you need to make sure you're working in an environment where people are investing in the work that needs to happen to create that environment, and that they genuinely believe that that work is worth doing because it leads to a better product and happier employees, and that all of that matters. And I think one thing I would encourage everybody to do, especially as you're starting out your career, is that you have a choice to make. Like, you are the one making the choice on where you end up. And when you go interview with people, you should be asking and making sure that they care about this stuff. And you can choose to go to a company that does care about it.
Yeah, going off of that, I was curious, like, do you think, like, what are ways that you can gauge that before you go into a company? Like, I feel like, when you have the interview, you have that last 5 minutes, be like, any questions? But how do you, like, they're going to tell you things that you want to hear. Like, yeah, our company culture is great. Like, how do you really determine what it's like?
What do you think, Lily?
I mean, that's a really hard one. I'm not really sure. I think it's more about just asking what's the company culture like. I think throughout the interview, like, while they are interviewing you, you're also interviewing them. And so try to just make those connections and relationships while you're working through all these problems. Because also with technical interviews, it's mainly like problem solving, right? So you should also be gauging, like, do I like how I'm working with this person? And you just kind of have to sense out what people are like. It's really, really hard to do straight up at the interview stage, so I don't really have good advice there. But just remember that you're also interviewing them throughout the entire hour, not just at the last 5 minutes.
And honestly, like, you can reach out to people, like, you can do cold reach outs over LinkedIn, other people that work there, other women that work there that are in high positions. Like, I think talking to people that work there is a really good way to get a sense for, people that aren't interviewing you, other people that work at the company, to understand the dynamics of maybe a specific team. I think I mentioned this last time we were talking, Allison and Annie, but like, just because even a specific team at a company is problematic doesn't mean the whole company is problematic. It always comes down to the manager. And I'll never forget when I left a job once, I had someone tell me, ask me like, well, why are you leaving this job? And how did you know it was time to go? And I explained why. And they said, wow, I guess it's true. You don't leave the company, you leave the manager. And like, it is really true. I think you, just because you're in, let's say, a big company where your manager is problematic or the team is problematic, that doesn't mean there aren't other places in the company that might be better. And so I would just ask and reach out to people and try to find out as much as possible. You're right, it is really hard in an interview to get real answers, but I think doing what you can to really understand people and understanding who they are during the interview process, not just talking about the work part, but like, really, who is this person that I'm going to be working with? Like, trying to go deep will help you understand how they might treat you when you work there.
I had someone ask me yesterday in an interview what my biggest pet peeve is at work. Like, you can ask whatever questions you want to try to get a sense of the manager's personality. I thought it was a great question.
It is a good question. Now I'm thinking, how would I have answered that?
Oh, I had so many answers. It was very easy.
When people don't put tools back in the right place in the lab.
Yeah, so like Lily said, you're interviewing them too. You know, if people aren't treating you respectfully during the interview process, if you don't feel like, you know, that you're getting enough information throughout the process, it could be a sign. You know, it should be a respectful and encouraging interaction because they're trying to get you to join them as well.
Yeah, and it's so important to find a culture where you do feel respected and you can grow as a person. And we really appreciated all the advice that you have given us in this whole panel. I personally learned so much that I will definitely take while moving forward in the rest of my college career. But this kind of sums up all the questions that me and Allison have planned. So if any of you guys want to ask questions, please feel free to put it in the Q&A. And while we have questions popping up, and we'll have Karen look through the questions and read some questions off.
Yeah, our first question is, does the panel have any suggested books to read?
Does anyone else want to go?
Bethany, I feel like you have good answers here.
Yeah.
Yes, I love to read. I am a speed reader. My husband makes fun of me because I will literally read a book in like a 2-hour sitting. And I've always been that way ever since I was a kid. My mom used to get so mad because I would just go through books so fast, and she would have to take me back to Barnes and Noble, which was like my favorite place to be. I really love, and most people know this, I'm obsessed with Brene Brown. I've read everything she's written probably 10 times over. She is one of the people I go to when I'm really struggling with, you know, how to lead through difficult situations, how to partner through difficult situations, how to figure out myself. It's a lot about reflection and really understanding who you are. And so she's written a couple of really amazing books. Dare to Lead is one of them, which is really great. And I really loved that. But basically anything she's written. So she is a researcher on vulnerability. She studies vulnerability. And she's done a bunch of studies for a really long time on vulnerability, and she's written about them. And she has some TED Talks and things you can watch on YouTube. But I really love her viewpoint on why vulnerability is so important as a collaborator, as a teammate, as a partner, as a leader, and how it's like really critical to building trust, and that, you know, trust is the most important thing above all else. What I love about her is that she gives like very actionable feedback and very actionable things that you can walk away and like institute it into your daily life. Which I've done many, many times over. Like I have multiple skills and tools in my toolbox from her. And so I really like when I can read something and walk away and like put it into action in my life. And so I like her for that.
All right, Karen, do you want to move on to the next question?
Yeah. So as a leader, do you ever doubt your ability to lead your vision? And if so, how do you combat that?
Oh man. Yeah, of course. Every day I doubt it. I think that you're not human if you don't have moments of doubt. I would say that I get through those moments by doing a couple of things. One, I believe in manifestations. I believe in writing things down, and setting goals and writing them down. And I also believe in writing down accomplishments and like really trying to take time to recognize the things that went really well, especially for women. I think sometimes we fall into that negative speak a lot, or like we're not enough or we're not good enough. And so imposter syndrome, great, also the same thing. So I think making sure that you're writing things down that you did do, that you did really well, that went really well. And also highlighting when your peers and your partners in your team do great things. I used to be terrible at that early in my career. I was like really good with my team on like giving them critical feedback and being like, here's how you get better. Like, hey, that meeting, you just had a meeting. Here's some ways that you can like do even better next time. And I thought it was really helpful because I was like constantly giving people like, you know, have the tools to level up. And I realized, and so I was terrible at giving that really good positive affirmation in the moment. And it turns out that like, that's really, really important to help with those moments of doubt. That you give, you know, make sure you give your teammates and your partners and your friends like really quick in the moment, like, wow, that went really well. You did a great job doing that, because that really helps everybody lead through those moments of doubt. We like hold on to them. So that would be my piece of advice there.
I think for me, when I'm feeling in a place of doubt, I turn to other people on the team that I trust, and talk through it. And usually they tell me I'm being crazy and I don't need to worry about whatever it is I'm worrying about. And just having someone else tell you like it's going to be okay, you don't need to doubt yourself, I found is really powerful.
Yeah, it's okay to need that too, right? It's okay to need someone else to tell you that you're crazy. There was this woman told me a woman I was interviewing actually, told me that at Google, they have this concept called the rubber ducking. They call it rubber ducking. I don't know if any of you have heard this, but it's like, they have this concept called rubber ducking. And basically what it means is if you go up to somebody and you're like, and you're like spewing all this stuff. I'm like really concerned about all this and I don't know what to do about this and I don't know how to solve this problem. And then as you're talking and as you're spewing all this stuff out, you're like, oh, but never mind, I just fixed it. I figured it out. I got my comp, everything's fine. And then you're like, okay, never mind, walk away. And it's called rubber ducking because like basically you could just be talking to a rubber duck. Like you don't even have to be talking to a person. It's just like you need that moment of like talking it through yourself. And so sometimes even like, you know, talking to the person like Sara was mentioning is just needed to like talk yourself through it, you know, not even to get that positive affirmation back.
Just a funny tidbit on the rubber ducking phenomenon. My friend who studies CS at a different university, her professor actually has this giant inflatable rubber duck where students can walk up to the giant inflatable rubber duck and talk about the code that they can't debug. And then at the end of the semester, they like all took pictures of the giant rubber duck because it helped them so much. So I thought that was hilarious.
I didn't even know it was a thing. I'd never heard of it before, but like a candidate I was interviewing brought it up and she was like, it actually was really interesting. It was someone that we decided not to hire, but it was someone that I really enjoyed talking to and we got along really well. And then at the end of the call, she was like, if you ever like need a rubber duck, like just call me and we can talk. And I thought that was so awesome. You know, telling this person that, you know, hey, we're not going to move forward. But meanwhile, she's telling me like, if you ever want a rubber duck, like I'll be here for you. And I know you'll be here for me and we can like keep in touch. And I thought that was such a great way to like relationship build because like you guys mentioned, who knows where we'll be 5 years from now, 10 years from now. We might be, our paths might cross again, so.
Another question is, having grown from employees to leaders yourselves, what things do you now know to do to create a prosperous workplace? And this is our last question for tonight.
Lily or Sara, go ahead.
I'll take a stab at it. I think something that I learned working, I never learned this in college, even though I wish I did, is that it's not just the work that's going to make your job enjoyable. It's the culture, it's the people, it's your relationships with people. So I think really focusing on making that a positive experience for everybody just goes such a long way, and makes everybody happy to come to work every day.
Yeah, I would just bounce off of that is as like going from the employee to more leading a team. it was creating that culture. Like I would come in with the jokes, I would come in and ask everyone about their weekend, you know, just trying to create that like, hey, we can all just chat and be friends here, really goes a long way, because when you start building those relationships on the team, like the team just does a lot better. Like you enjoy working with each other more when you just also know what's going on in each other's lives. I think that's the biggest thing there.
Yeah, I can add just something to that, which I totally agree with everything you both said. And I think really being present and being available. And I strive, like it is my goal to be accessible always, regardless of how big the company is. Like I always want to be that leader that isn't unapproachable. Like I've worked for people in my life that that are like velvet rope, closed door, like they don't talk to you, and that's how they establish power, is by like making it so that you're scared to talk to them, like you're scared to walk up or, you know, sit down and have a conversation. And I've always told myself that the best environment is one where like it feels like there's no levels, it feels like there's no hierarchy, it feels like you can go and have a conversation with anyone and be really honest and open, and everyone is really approachable. And I feel like that's when you have not only the best work environment, but like the best product that comes out of it. So that's something that I've really tried hard at, and I want to make sure all of our leaders like at Humane continue to do that.
Yeah, thank you so much for these responses. They've been really insightful, and I'm sure all of us have learned so much about what it's like in the workplace and just career trajectories and advice. And I really appreciate you guys taking your time out of the night to come and talk with us. But with that, we will conclude the panel. We just appreciate you so much for doing this with us. And we hope you guys have a great night.
Thank you both. Thank you, everybody. This was so wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Very fun.
All right, thanks, guys.